Hello everyone. Welcome to the session of Theory of Computation or Formal Languages and Automata Theory. In today's session, we will discuss about the types of Turing machines. We will see what is the Church thesis, followed by we will see some of the concepts related to computational complexities. So let us start our discussion with the types of the Turing machines. So here we are having a broad categories of the Turing machines, but here we are discussing only the limited types of the Turing machines which are important as per exam point of view. Okay, so the first one is non-deterministic Turing machine. So already we have discussed that what is deterministic and non-deterministic. We have seen what is deterministic finite automata, non-deterministic finite automata. We have also seen what is deterministic push-down automata, non-deterministic push-down automata. So here we could say that Turing machine could be either deterministic or non-deterministic. Okay, so if from a particular state on particular input there exists only one transition, unique transition, then that particular Turing machine will be considered as deterministic, right? So the controversial one is that non-deterministic, in which from a particular state on particular input symbol and by reading the current tape symbol, there may be multiple transitions. Okay, so there may be multiple transitions. So if the Turing machine consists of the multiple transitions from a state on particular input, then that particular Turing machine will be considered as non-deterministic Turing machine. Okay, so if you look at the definition here, in this at any current state and for the tape symbol it is reading, there may be different possible actions to be performed. Okay, action means a combination of writing a symbol on the tape, moving the tape head, and going to the next state. Okay, so here as we know that in Turing machine, whenever we specify the transition in the transition diagram, we specify the three tuples, right? So first one is the input that we have considered from the input tape, and next one is how we replace the input, okay, that we have read, and next one is the move, okay, that one is the move, so we can move the head towards either left or right. Okay, so from a state on a particular input means you can read that particular input, you can replace that input with other symbols, and you may move the head towards either left or right. Okay, so for this combination, we may have the multiple transitions. Okay, so for these combinations we are going to have the multiple transitions. Okay, let me consider one of the example here. Suppose we are in state q naught. Okay, so in q naught, if I am reading A, I replace that A with X and move the head towards right, and I will be in the same state Q naught. Okay. And next possibility is that in Q naught, if I get A, I replace that A with Y and move the head towards left, and also I will move from state Q naught to Q1. Right. So if you observe here, in Q naught for input symbol A, we are having the two possibilities. The one is that A could be replaced by X and head could be moved towards right, and the state will be Q naught itself. Okay, that's why we are having self transition. The another possibility is that in Q naught, if we get A, that could be replaced with Y and head could be moved towards left, and the state changes from Q naught to Q1. Okay, so here there may be multiple actions for a input symbol from a current state. So that action means the possible combinations of the right symbol that we are writing onto the tape, and how we are moving the tape, and how we are changing the state. Okay, so this will gives the non-determinism property into the Turing machine. Okay, so hence the Turing machine will be considered as a non-deterministic Turing machine. Okay, next one, a Turing machine with multiple tapes. Okay, so this is a kind of Turing machine that has one finite control and more than one tape, each with its own read and write head. Okay, so generally here, as the name is itself explaining the meaning, that the Turing machine with multiple tapes. So till now we have seen the Turing machine that is having only single input tape. So here there is a possibility that we could have the Turing machine that is consisting of multiple tapes. Okay, and each tape has its own head for reading the symbols. Okay, so let me consider here. I have taken the two tapes here, input tapes here, and one head is belongs to the first tape, and another second tape is having its own dedicated tape head. Okay, so these tape heads can move independently. uh, then moreover, this Turing machine will be considered as the Turing machine with multiple tapes. Okay, so next one, we are having a Turing machine with multiple heads. Okay, so here this is a Turing machine which consists of single control unit and one input tape. But here we are going to have the multiple heads. Okay, so in the previous case we have the multiple tapes, each tape with its own head, right? So in this case we are having a single tape. Okay, but we are going to have the multiple heads. Okay, multiple head, but only one head is allowed to read or write. Okay, so even though this tape is having the multiple heads, at a particular point of time only one particular head is allowed to read the symbol or write the symbol. Okay, and next one, fourth one, Turing machine with infinite tape. Okay, so this is a kind of Turing machine that has one finite control and one tape which extends infinitely in both the directions, right? So this is general Turing machine that we have seen, in which the tape is infinite in both the directions, right? So if you consider the left end of the input tape, it is infinite. If you consider the right end of the input tape, it is infinite. Okay, so it is infinite in both the directions. Next one, so this is the most important property here, Church's thesis. Okay, so you may get a short answer question in this particular unit related to this particular topic. So what is this Church thesis? Okay, so Church thesis is nothing but uh, consider that we are having a Turing machine. What the Church Alonzo Church said is, uh, if we are having a Turing machine, if any problem that can be solved by a Turing machine, that same problem can also be solved by a computer. Okay, so this is something like related to the computation. Okay, so if you get a question that what type of problems that a computer can solve, right? So here, the church has given one statement that whatever the problems or the computations that can be performed by the Turing machine, the same problems or the computations can be performed by the computer as well. Okay, so here, if you see the sentence here, what could naturally be called an effective procedure? What could naturally be called an effective procedure can be realized by a Turing machine, right? So, whenever you have some procedure or algorithm to perform certain computation, if that algorithm can be realized by a Turing machine, then that same algorithm can be executed by the computer. Okay, so in that sense, you can understand. Okay, so any real world computation can be translated into an equivalent computation involving a Turing machine. Okay, so generally we use the computers to perform the computations, right? So to understand that limit of the computation, what we can do here is that we can take a Turing machine and we can check out whether that particular computation can be performed by the Turing machine or not. If it is performed by the Turing machine, then it can also be performed by the computer. Okay, so this statement was formulated by Alonzo Church in 1930 and usually referred as Church's thesis. Okay, that means if you have written any algorithm or a procedure, that algorithm or procedure can be simulated by a Turing machine, or that algorithm can also be executed by a Turing machine. Okay. Next one is that universal Turing machine. So it is a Turing machine that is capable of simulating another Turing machine by encoding. Okay, so here to explain this or to justify this point, let me consider one Turing machine. So I am having a Turing machine M, okay, that accepts some language L. So I'm having a Turing machine that accepts some language L. Okay, so given a Turing machine M and a string W, can you say that the Turing machine halts? Okay, so to answer this particular question, we can use the universal Turing machine, right? So here, the point is that given the Turing machine description and some string W, the universal Turing machine can able to find out whether the Turing machine accepts that W or rejects that W or loops forever. Okay, so generally whenever you construct a Turing machine, whenever you give a particular word or a string to that Turing machine, there are three possibilities, right? The first one is that the Turing machine may halt and accept the string W. The Turing machine may halt and reject the string W if W is not in a language. And next one is the Turing machine uh, loops forever. Okay, that means the Turing machine may enter into the infinite loop, right? So these are the three possibilities for a Turing machine for a particular language L. Okay, so now what I am asking here is, given a description of a Turing machine and some string W, can we able to answer whether the Turing machine accepts the W? Okay, so to realize it, what we have to do here is that we can use the concept of universal Turing machine, right? So what we can do here is that to test whether the Turing machine developed for a particular language L may halt or may reject or loop forever, what we can do here is that we can use this universal Turing machine, right? So let me consider uh, what I can do here is that I will give the description of Turing machine M along with the string W to the universal Turing machine. Okay, the moment when we give these two inputs, that means description of a Turing machine that we are having and the string W that we want to test. Okay, the universal Turing machine will simulate the given Turing machine M. Okay, and tries to find out the acceptance or rejection. Okay, so if the Turing machine M accepts the W, then universal Turing machine will come out with a result that accept. If the Turing machine M rejects the string W, then universal Turing machine will also come out with a output as reject. If the Turing machine M will not accept the W and enters into the infinite loop, then universal Turing machine will also gives the result as infinite loop. Okay, that means the universal Turing machine enters into infinite loop too. Okay, so what we are doing here is that universal Turing machine is simulating the another Turing machine. Okay, so for simulating the Turing machine, the universal Turing machine uses the concept of encoding, right? So it will read out the input, the given input W, okay, and the description of the Turing machine, okay, and then it will encode it into its format so that the universal Turing machine could able to find out whether it is accepted or rejected. Okay, so this is the universal Turing machine. Okay. So let me consider one example here. Suppose you have written a program P. Okay, suppose you have written a program P and uh, you want to test whether the program is giving the correct result for the given input or not. Okay, suppose you have written a program, right? So let me say you have written a program that checks whether the number is even or not. So program is there P, the input is there, let me say 3. Okay, so the program is there and the input that you have given is 3. So you want to check whether the program will give the output or not, right? So what we will do here is that we will take the program and input and we give it to the computer. Okay, we will give it to the computer. So here the program that you are considering, consider that it is a Turing machine. Okay, and the input 3 that you have given, consider it as a W. Okay, and now what you are checking here is that whether this particular input is given to a particular program is going to produce an output or not, right? So to test it, what we are doing here is that we are going to execute this program along with the input onto the computer. Okay, so same here we are doing. So for that Turing machine, that means the program, okay, and for the given input W, we simulate it by using the universal Turing machine. So here the computer, you could assume it as a, it is UTM, universal Turing machine, right? So if uh, the program is correct, okay, then obviously the universal Turing machine is going to give a correct result, isn't it? So that is the some sort of relationship that you can establish. Okay, so Turing machine that you are having, if you want to test it on a particular string, that means it will accept or reject or loop forever, then you can give this Turing machine and input string W as input to the universal Turing machine. Okay, so that will gives the result by doing some sort of simulation. Next one, restricted Turing machine. So in this Turing machine, we are going to have some sort of restrictions here. Uh, but this Turing machine, restricted Turing machine, is having the equal computational power as the Turing machine. Okay, so just what we are having here is we are going to have certain restrictions. Anyhow, this restricted Turing machine is having the same power as the Turing machine. Okay, so what are the restrictions? So let us have a look on them. So first one, we replace the Turing machine tape that is infinite in both the direction by a tape that is infinite only in right direction. Okay, so if one restrictions that we are considering here is we are making the infinite tape as finite finite in left direction, okay, and it is still infinite in the right direction. Okay, so we have converted the infinite tape into the finite tape that is finite in the left side, that means left end, and infinite in the right end. Okay, so just we have converted the left end into the finite. Okay, remaining the right end will be the infinite. Next one is that the Turing machine does not print blank as replacement type symbol, right? So generally in the Turing machine we use these blank symbols. Okay, so here we could not use the blank symbol as a replacement. Okay, and we assume that id is consisting of non-blank symbols and always begins at the left end of the input, right? So here the head tape head initially points to the leftmost symbol in the input tape. Okay, that is the one point. And next one is that we could not use the blank symbols as a replacement characters or replacement symbols. Okay, and also the instantaneous description doesn't contains any blank symbols. Okay, so these are the certain restrictions that we have added to the Turing machine, and hence it is called as restricted Turing machine. Okay. And next one is multi-stack machine. So already this multi-stack machine is nothing but it is a two-stack PDA. Okay, simply I could say it is a two-stack PDA. Okay, so already we know that uh, the Turing machine can accept the languages that are not accepted by the pushdown automata with one stack. Okay, so already we know that the pushdown automata accepts only the context free languages, right? Pushdown automata accepts only the context free languages, right? So if you give some larger or complex languages like context sensitive language or recursive language, it could not be accepted by the PDA, right? However, such type of languages can be accepted by two stack PDA. Okay, two stack PDA. And already I mentioned that the two stack PDA is equivalent to the Turing machine. Okay, so if we provide PDA with two stacks, then it accepts any language that can be accepted by a Turing machine. Okay, next one, counter machine. So here this is the machine which is related to the multi-stack machine. So it is an extension of the multi-stack machine, I could say. So here a counter machine has the same structure as multi-stack machine, but in place of each stack there is a counter. Okay, so here the stacks are going to be replaced with the counters. Okay, then the counters are going to consisting of non-negative integers, right? So the stacks are replaced by the counters. Okay, and here the push and pop operations are going to be implemented by using addition or subtraction. That means push and pop operations will be implemented as in terms of addition or subtraction, right? So let me consider here I want to accept the language L is equal to a power n and b power 1, b power n. Okay, so what we generally do in case of uh, uh, a Turing machine that is having some stack or two stack PDA, whenever we get a, we push that a onto the stack. Okay, whenever we get b, what we will do, we will pop the stack. Okay, so for matching b, we will pop the stack. Okay, so this is the general case that we will consider when we have the stack. Okay, so here the counter machine means we are not going to have the stack, we are going to have the counter. Okay, so here let me consider here I am having a counter here. So whenever I see a I will increment the counter, right? So initially I could take the value as 0. So the moment when I get a, I will increment the counter. If I get another a, I will increment the counter so that the counter value will become 2. The moment when I get b, I will subtract the counter. Okay, I will subtract 1 from the counter, right? So when I get b, what will happen? The 2 will be become 1. If I get another b, this 1 will become 0. Okay, so once the counter will become 0, you cannot subtract it. That means you are not going to have the negative values, right? So you could see in the previous case with the stack, whenever we saw a, we perform the push operation. Whenever we saw b, we popped the stack, right? So here with respect to the counters, what we are doing, whenever we are getting a, we are going to increment the counter value. Okay, whenever we get b, we are going to decrement the counter value. Okay, so this is how the operations are going to be performed in the counter machines. Okay, so here one more point is that the move of the counter machine depends on its state. Okay, comma input symbol, and which if any of the counters are 0. In one move, the counter machine can change state, add or subtract 1 from any of its counters independently. However, counter is not allowed to become negative. Okay, so we cannot subtract 1 from the counter which is already 0, right? So here you may get a question that, sir, how many counters we can place? So we may have the multiple counters. Okay, so we can perform the operations on each counter independently. Okay, so operation means we can perform addition or subtraction operations. Okay, so depending upon the language or depending upon the computation that you are performing, you are going to have the multiple counters instead of the stacks. Okay. And next one, recursive language. So generally what is meant by recursive language? So a language is recursive if there exists a Turing machine that accepts every string of the language and rejects every string that is not in the language. Okay, so this is called as recursive language. So what is meant by recursive language? A language is said to be a recursive language if there exists a Turing machine M. Okay, there exists a Turing machine M. If you give a string that belongs to the language, then definitely the Turing machine will accept that string. If you give a string that does not belongs to the language, then definitely the Turing machine is going to reject that string. Okay, and it halts. Okay, so in either of the cases the Turing machine halts. Okay, but if the string is valid, it is going to give the answer as accept. If the string is invalid, it is going to give the answer as reject. Okay, so this is the recursive language. Now what is meant by recursively enumerable language? So there is only one change. So a language is recursively enumerable language if for such language there exists a Turing machine, okay, that accepts the string w, okay, or reject the string w, or may enter into the infinite loop, right? So there is the three possibility. A language is said to be recursively enumerable, okay, for such language if there exists a Turing machine, and if you give the string w that belongs to the language, then what will happen? The Turing machine will halt in a final state. Okay, the Turing machine will halt in a final state and give the answer as accept. Okay, if you give the string w that does not belongs to the language, then the Turing machine, the Turing machine may halt and give the answer as reject, or it may enter into the infinite loop for a string that does not belongs to the language, right? So that is the extra property that is added with respect to the Turing machine of recursively enumerable language, right? So in the recursive language, the Turing machine either accepts the string or rejects the string. But in case of recursively enumerable language, the Turing machine may halt or may not halt. Okay, so that means if it is not halting, means it is entering into the infinite loop. So definitely it is not going to halt for the given invalid string w. Okay, so this is the difference. So you may get a short answer questions related to this, the difference between recursive language and recursively enumerable language. Okay, so that's about the Turing machine. So let us move on to that computability. Okay, so here we are going to discuss about computational complexities. Okay, so here we are going to discuss about the everything related to the computations. So what do you mean by computation? So generally computation is nothing but solving a problem. Okay, so the way of solving a problem is called as a computation, right? So generally, in real time, the problems can be divided into two categories. One could be solvable and another one could be unsolvable, right? So generally, this is the general case. So if you consider any problem, that problem could either be a solvable one or could be unsolvable. Okay. So when we can say that a problem is solvable and when we can say that a problem is unsolvable, what do you mean by solvable and unsolvable, right? So again, the words are self-explanatory here. Solvable means the problem for which there exists a solution, okay, are called as the solvable problems. The set of problems for which we don't have any solutions or for which there exists no solutions, then those problems are called as unsolvable. Okay, so here in the computer science, there is a small change in the persistence of this solvable and unsolvable, right? So here uh, a problem is said to be a solvable if there exists an algorithm, okay, to solve them, or we can also prove that mathematically that the problem is solvable. So these problems are considered as solvable one, right? So whenever we have the problems for which we don't have any solutions, okay, then those problems are called as unsolvable problems. Okay, so so to discuss about this solvable and unsolvable problems, let me consider one famous problem, Königsberg Bridge problem. Okay, so actually this is the problem which was there in the 17th century. Okay, this was the famous problem, and this problem was solved by Euler. Okay, so here let us see the problem. So here Königsberg Bridge problem means we are going to have islands. So you could see we are having the four islands: island A, B, C, and D. Okay, and there is a river. Okay, there is a river which is flowing across these islands. Okay, A, B, C, D, and these islands are connected by the bridges. So here you could see the island C or the land C is connected with the two bridges to the land A or island A, and again island A is connected to the island D by using the two bridges. Okay, so same is the case, island A is connected with island B with a bridge. Okay, and C is connected to B island by using a bridge, and B is connected to D island using a another bridge. So overall, if you could generalize this overall figure, you could find that there are four islands A, B, C, D, which are connected by using seven bridges. Okay, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So seven bridges, right? So the problem is that we have to start from one particular land. The problem is that you have to start from one particular land and you have to traverse every bridge exactly once, and you must end up the point where you started. Okay, suppose you started from a land sea. Okay, then you have to traverse every bridge, okay, exactly once. Okay, so after traversing every bridge exactly once, you must reach the point where you started. That means you must reach the land where you started, or island where you started. So definitely you must reach the land sea. Okay, so we have to find out the solution. That means we have to find out how we can traverse the bridges from sea, so that after traversing every bridge exactly once, we could reach the same land or same island sea. Okay, so that is the problem. Okay, so this problem was solved by Euler. Okay, so what the Euler has done, Euler converted this entire problem into the graph. That means Euler has converted this lands or islands into the vertices, okay, or we can call it as nodes, and the bridges were converted into the edges. Okay, so Euler has converted this entire uh, problem into the graph, and Euler proved that this problem cannot be solved. Okay, this problem cannot be solved. Why? Because if you consider each vertex or node in a graph, it is having odd degree. Okay, so if you consider here node C, if you take, it is having odd degree. Okay, if you consider node A, it is having odd degree. So Euler has proved that this problem is not going to have a solution, because the every node or the every vertex is having the odd degree. The problem would have been solved if the each node is having some even degrees. Okay, so like this way the Euler has proved that this problem is not solvable. Okay, so here this is the points which I discussed. Degree of each vertex should be even. So Euler proved that to solve this particular Königsberg bridge problem, the degree of each node must be even, but it is not even, it is odd. So this problem could not be solved, right? So here, what I want to justify here is that if a problem is there, and if that problem is not solvable, if that problem cannot be solved, then you must able to prove it mathematically. Okay, so when you prove a problem is not solvable mathematically, then that problem will become solvable. Okay, so if you observe here, the Euler has mentioned that this problem is not solvable, okay, by giving a proof. Okay, so definitely this problem has become a solvable one. Okay, he gave that don't waste your time on solving this particular problem, because this problem is not going to have any solution. Okay, so since Euler has given a mathematical proof that this problem is not solvable, so this problem becomes solvable. Okay, so I would like to say here is that a problem is said to be a solvable one if there exists a finite solution, or if there exists a potential solution for that particular problem, or if there is a mathematical proof that the problem is not solvable, then that problem is considered as solvable. Okay, next one, unsolvable. A problem is said to be unsolvable if there exists no solution. Okay, so whatever the problems those were there in 17th century, 18th century, or 19th century were unsolvable, but now the today those problems become solvable, right? So if you observe here, when the problem was given, it was unsolvable, but Euler has proved that this problem is not solvable because of what we can call odd degrees. Okay, So that problem has become a solvable one. So whenever we give a mathematical proof that a problem is not solvable, so that particular problem is going to become a solvable one, right? So uh, generally, initially, all the problems were unsolvable. So as the time passes on, as the technology progresses, all the problems which are there in unsolvable category will become or will comes into the solvable one. Okay, so in the 17th or 18th century or 19th century, no one assumed that uh, the devices will able to operate by themselves. Okay, so like the Google car that we are having, just like IoT devices that we are having, so no one assumed that, imagined that that type of technology will come, okay, in those olden days, right? So those problems considered as unsolvable one, but as the time progressed and the technology emerged, the unsolvable problem becomes solvable. Okay, so this is about the computational problems. Okay, and this is a small story related to the problems solvable and unsolvable. In the next session we will discuss about the decidable undecidable problems, and we will discuss about some of the uh, topics related to these computational complexities. So that will end up our unit Turing machine, okay, and computational complexities. Okay. Thank you for attending session. Have a nice day.